What's going on, sports fans? Thank you for checking out the Off the Dome Sports Podcast. My name is Bryce, also known as Redfish, and today we're going to be covering our 2024 NFL Hot Takes. It's in our name. And today we're going to be covering everything from MVP picks to division winners to record breakers. If you love football, especially fantasy football, make sure to check out our past videos where we went through our top 10 series, our My Guys and Deep Sleepers, as well as doing a 12-team mock draft we think you will really love. Now, we love making content, and we hope you love watching it. So like, comment, and subscribe to let us know what you want to see next from the OTD crew. Make sure to check out this whole video for stats, debates, and hot takes off the dome. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Off the Dome Sports Podcast, your favorite sports podcast where two, but sometimes three, sports lovers sit and give their hot takes
Off the dome.
I am Redfish.
Lionel Frankenstein here.
And I'm Rebo Hustle.
And today we are living up to our intro. We are talking hot takes for this NFL season. Now, I know it's a little bit early, but that's what hot takes are about. They're about having not enough knowledge and thinking it anyway. So that's what we're going to do in this episode. We're each going to give two hot takes. They can be anything in the NFL, from coaches to players to teams to who's winning the division, who's finishing winless. We'll see what we talk about. Without any further ado, I'll go ahead and start us off with my first hot take for this season. It comes out of the NFC East, and I'm not going to necessarily say they're going to win the division, but I am predicting that the Washington Commanders make the playoffs this season. Now, to be fair, I'm 2 for 2 in the past 2 years of predicting a bad team to turn good. I called the Detroit Lions 2 years ago when they went 9-8 and finished a game out of the playoffs. And I called the Texans last year when they were the last in the league in win total prediction and won the division. So I have 100% success rate over the past 2 seasons. Now, why do I think it's the Washington Commanders? Well, let me break it down like this. Jaden Daniels, Scary Terry, Austin Eckler, Cliff Kingsbury is calling their plays with Dan Quinn as the new head coach. Switch to the other side of the field. They got the best interior defensive line combo in the league with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne. Frankie Louvu's added as their new middle linebacker, with Bobby Wagner also being on the inside. Jeremy Chin added on the back end. Drafted 2 really good players this past draft, and Jerzon Newton to shore up that defensive line, and then Mike Sanders still to step in and probably be one of the best slot corners in the league in year 1. Now, what I think really brings me to this realization is the last time we saw a defensive head coach take over for a young team and draft a quarterback at pick 2 that nobody believed in was in 2023 with the Houston Texans, and they turned it around quite easily. Now, I don't think DeMeco Ryans and Dan Quinn are the same guy, and I don't think C.J. Stroud and Jaden Daniels are the same guy, but I think it's similar situations where you have this franchise who's known for being not very good. I mean, you look at what the Texans were going through. They had, at one point, a team chaplain being their GM just like 4 or 5 years ago, and everybody thought they were the laughingstock of the league, with McNair saying, don't let the prisoners run the jail, and the whole Deshaun Watson situation, and then they turn it around, get Nick Caserio as their GM, hired DeMeco Ryans, and now the Texans are one of the most beloved teams in the NFL. The Washington Commanders have a similar turnaround, going from Dan Snyder, who's probably the worst owner in NFL history, to now having Dan Quinn as their head coach, Josh Harris as their team owner, and creating a new identity for themselves with Jaden Daniels as their quarterback. Now, I know we are biased as LSU fans, but I think Jaden Daniels has a very high possibility of being the Rookie of the Year this year because of what he can do not only through the air and how much he improved over his years in college, but also what he does on the ground. He's one of the best playmakers you'll ever see with the ball in his hands at the quarterback position. Speaking to the rest of the division, every year since 2004, the NFC East has had a different winner. Normally, it's bounced around between the Eagles and the Cowboys, but the Commanders have had a few wins throughout the years. The Giants, of course, have won two Super Bowls in that frame, so we know that there's a lot of parity in that division. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win the division because, obviously, the Cowboys and the Eagles, great teams last year. Cowboys did lose out in the first round of the playoffs, same with the Eagles. However, Commanders have a shot this year. That's all I'm saying. Cowboys lost Dan Quinn to this Washington Commanders team, so he knows where he's coming from. The Eagles last season looked like a powerhouse again. Started off like 10-1, I think, and then lose 6 out of their last 7. Just not a good look for the Eagles last season. Had a really strong collapse, like a huge collapse at the end of the year, losing the wild card to a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that really had no business even being there. They were just in the worst division in football, and ended up winning it. So for me, this is just kind of like a recipe of everything has to go right, but I think it will. Because of the youth of the team mixed with the veteran presence that you bring in with all your free agents, like I talked about with Jeremy Chin and Frankie Louvu on the defense. Cliff Kingsbury, while he wasn't a great head coach for the Cardinals, we know offensive innovation is his key, and he's going to be a really good player, and I think Jaden fits right into that system. They add Austin Eckler to be the receiving back to mix with Brian Robinson, who's a great in-between-the-tackles runner, and then Scary Terry has never had a stable quarterback situation, but now he gets to work with Jaden Daniels, and I think it'll be his best year yet, too. My biggest question marks for the Commanders are, do all these free agency pickups work out? And secondary, they don't have much of it. They have Mike Sainristil, but Emmanuel Forbes wasn't necessarily the best year one player last season. Benjamin St. Juste is their other corner. So, it doesn't look like they necessarily have the best secondary in the league, but if you can get to the passer and you can stop the run, you can cover up a bad secondary. And the Commanders we saw had some scrappy games last season. I think they'll be better this year, and they'll push for that 6 or 7 seed to go ahead and lock themselves into the NFC playoffs.
Yeah.
Soapbox off.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I don't really have much to say on it. I'm not going to – I've learned 2 things. Never question you on running backs, and I guess now never question you on the zero to hero turnaround in the NFL. So I worry that the only path to the playoffs would be them winning the division, because as the 6 or 7 fighting the Packers, I think we believe the Lions win that division, fighting the Packers, the Rams, and then one of the Cowboys or Eagles in their own division is going to be a really tough road. But again, you said it, so it'll probably happen.
Yeah, I like that you brought up the other teams, because that is something you have to think about. I do think the Packers will be good. They'll probably make the playoffs again. I do think in the NFC West, which I was going to talk about, but I decided to change up a little bit, I do think 3 of those teams are going to be vying for the playoffs this season. Probably only 2 of them will make it, but the Niners, the Rams, and the Seahawks will all have strong years, in my opinion. And then you have to think about the Eagles and the Cowboys. I think the Commanders are going to play well enough within their division and win the games they need to win to beat out one of those 2 East teams. I think we'll see 1 out of the West, 1 out of the North, and then 1 out of the East, with that team being the Commanders.
Yeah, I think my only dispute being we're all in on Jaden Daniels, and this isn't necessarily a hot take in Louisiana, but it is for nationwide. My one thing is I kind of hope it doesn't happen, because I don't know if I can take you talking about it if you got 3 in a row.
Thanks, man.
This guy's got teams like across half the league. They're like, my Lions, and now my Commanders.
My Texans.
I have 3 teams right now, and if the Commanders make the playoffs, I'll have 4.
Guess that's what happens when the Saints are just mediocre.
Yeah,
we have to find other sources of happiness.
It just makes you feel good when you predict a team to be good and then they are, and they're not supposed to. You create that bond with that team. So I'll go ahead and I'll let Rebo Hustle cover his first hot take.
And speaking of teams that you expected to be good, I died on this hill last year, and I'll die on this hill again, because we have not seen a full year of Aaron Rodgers for the New York Jets. I still think that they're going to win the AFC East handily. There's a lot of question marks going in from the other teams in the division. The Dolphins had to rebuild basically their whole defense. The Bills are rebuilding basically their whole offense. And then there's the Patriots, who no one cares about. The Jets defense allowed the second fewest points and the second fewest yards last season. Yards per drive, I'm not sure if it correlates or not. And they had some crazy additions, some veteran additions. And Hassan Reddick, they traded for a 3rd-round pick to replace John Franklin Myers, who they lost in free agency. I believe that that's an upgrade. Javon Kinlaw to shore up the spot next to Quinnen Williams, which has been the biggest question mark on this defense in the past couple of years. Just who plays this defensive tackle next to probably the premier defensive tackle now that Aaron Donald has retired. Mike Williams was brought in to be a stark contrast to Garrett Wilson. There's still some question marks with him. We got into that a couple of weeks ago, just with his injury, how quickly he can come back, how deadly he might be as a contributor. But I still think him as a large pass-catching physical receiver, he adds more to the offense than a lot of the slot guys, that profile that they have. They also added 3 veteran offensive linemen in John Simpson, Morgan Moses, and Tyron Smith. They also drafted a really young offensive lineman in Olaf Fashanu. He's got
Close enough.
Fashanu is how he says he pronounces his name, but he said he doesn't care if it's Fashanu or Fashanu. Also, they brought in Tyrod Taylor, so that way if Aaron Rodgers does magically go down for 2 years in a row, Zach Wilson doesn't have to play again.
Thank God.
And then another guy that they two other guys they drafted that will probably play large parts in this year's offense is Malachi Corley, more of a slot kind of guy, very similar to Garrett Wilson, so we know that offense knows how to get a guy like him to produce. And then Braylon Allen, a real pass-catching back for this team, I believe. We've heard some things out of camp already about him being the go-to pass catcher for this backfield, with Breece Hall being the number 1 running back.
I mean,
Question, comments, and concerns?
all 3. Question: why do you hate the Dolphins?
I'm kind of more in on them this year than I have been in the past,
Okay.
just because of my buddy Jordan Brooks.
That's a very interesting player to make you a fan of a team. Comment, because like I said, I have all 3. Question, comment, and concern. My comment: I do really like this rookie class, and I think that's a really good thing with this Jets team. However, I don't know if I trust the health of this Jets team, and that's not only Aaron Rodgers. That's Mike Williams, who's coming off a torn ACL. That's Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith, who are both, I think, 61. That's Tyrod Taylor. Although he is the best backup quarterback that the Jets have ever had, he also is known to have the weirdest freak injuries that keep him off the field. So for me, it's, yes, the Jets have talent to win the AFC East. I wouldn't say handedly. That's kind of crazy. They have the talent to win the AFC East, but I don't know if they're going to be able to have the training room empty enough to win the AFC East. And then my concern rolls straight into that comment of, you have a 42-year-old quarterback coming off a torn Achilles. Although he said, if we would have been on a playoff push, I would have came back and played. I have the best Achilles of all time. He's basically the Trump of the quarterbacks in the NFL.
Greatest year of all time.
Just does it better than everybody else. But, I like the Jets, and I do think the Jets are a playoff team because another hot take that I won't be exploring is I think the Bills won't make the playoffs. I think the Jets are a playoff team. I just don't think winning the AFC East handedly is in the cards when the Miami Dolphins have everyone they do.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is by far, I think, the biggest question mark. And, I mean, if the roster is...
Oh, no, he's looking for the man in the corner.
I don't know, what was that about?
Yeah, it's just, I can't, I'm not an Aaron Rodgers stan or anything, but he was 40 and he won back-to-back league MVPs. We can't keep talking about, how old he is and this or whatever, but the last time you saw him, he was great.
Yeah, 2 years ago, he was incredible. But now the fact that he's 42 and coming off of a major injury for a quarterback.
He didn't get PCL surgery. He had a torn Achilles,
Please
which
let me know.
90% of the league had last year.
What?
What?
Fact check.
An abnormal percent of the league had a torn
Sure.
Achilles.
It did
last
feel
year.
like there was more torn Achilles
but,
than usual.
I mean, at 42, he's not going to heal as quickly and as completely. He still has to be able to move in the pocket. He can't be a complete statue. That's never been his game. He's not a Peyton Manning or a Tom Brady. He needs to be able to at least move some. And I'm not saying it's going to be a complete failure. I mean, I think the roster has been upgraded since last year, and everyone was singing their praises last year. So I'm worried about Aaron Rodgers. If he comes out and slings it week 1 and just the health is no longer a concern, then yeah, the Jets are in prime position to dominate.
Yeah, if I see Green Bay Aaron Rodgers over the first 3 weeks, I'm all in on the Jets. If he can come out there and he throws for 285, 290, and 2 or 3 touchdowns, and can complete 70% of his passes like we saw every year in Green Bay, then yeah, you got this one. This hot take will turn, I guess, lukewarm.
My biggest thing is an Achilles has never been an entire year thing like an ACL is, an entire year recovery. It's more like a 7 to 6 month type thing, and he's gotten an entire year. He hasn't played since week 1 of last year, and so I don't understand anything being with that being a recurring injury. Whereas, yes, his health just being that he's older is maybe a question mark that I'll be okay with. It's just I don't see a reoccurring injury being an argument.
Yeah, that's fair. We'll see when the season kicks off. But I'll go ahead and take the reins here and talk about the Carolina Panthers. This might not be like the hottest of takes. It might be like a step above lukewarm. But I think the Panthers offense on the shoulders of Bryce Young is going to take a pretty big step up from where they were last year. I mean, after last year's performance, like Bryce Young was pretty much written off. Like it was rough. It was rough. And I'm not a Bryce Young truther, trust me. I'm a part of that. Like Bryce Young had a bad season last year. But so did the Panthers. Like the entire team was just awful. When your number one, option on offense is 38-year-old Adam Thielen,
Fact.
Halfway in the grave already, man. It's ancient. But he showed off in the first, beginning of the season, really tapered off towards the end. So what the Panthers decided to do this offseason is really load up on offensive firepower. They added Deontay Johnson to be a kind of safety blanket option for Bryce Young. He's not someone who's going to take the top off the defense, but hit him with these 10, 12-yard passes here and there, and it's going to be able to move the ball pretty efficiently. They had Xavier Legette and Jonathan Brooks through the draft, and I think those are going to be, by the midseason, those will prove to be the biggest additions by far to this offense. I really do have faith in Xavier Legette being a really nice option in the NFL, not just in fantasy, but in the actual NFL in reality. And then Jonathan Brooks, I'll let Bryce speak a little bit. You like Jonathan Brooks, don't you?
I'm a big Jonathan Brooks fan. Obviously, you have to be cautious of that injury. So Chuba Hubbard will probably get most of the work for the first third of the season. But I think once Jonathan Brooks is healthy and ready to go at NFL speed, over the back half of the season, he will prove why he was the first running back taken off the board in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, that's the running back guy, so I'll let him do what he's got to do there. The offensive line has been greatly improved. And then, of course, they bring in Dave Canales to take over head coaching duties. So, I mean, we'll see what kind of offense happens. But, I mean, he helped revitalize Baker Mayfield last year, a top-tier prospect going into the draft who had bounced around a few teams and everyone had kind of written off. Maybe we're seeing the same situation with Bryce Young, and Dave Canales can unlock something that obviously the Panthers saw in Bryce Young.
Yeah, I've never been a Bryce Young truther, but the play last year was not equivalent to his talent. The offensive line was horrendous. I mean, even a terrible, it was one of the worst interior offensive lines in the league, and they sat down and addressed that straight up and brought in, I'm going to bore you with offensive line names, but brought in Damian Lewis, Austin Corbett, and Robert Hunt. Robert Hunt's one of the best guards in the game. Yes, there's bigger names, but Robert Hunt gets it done day in, day out, and the two other guys are no slumps either. So that's the biggest thing. You're giving Bryce Young time. You already had two really good tackles in Taylor Moton, and I'm not even gonna try his name. Ike Okongwu. The guy got drafted top 5 like 2-3 years ago. But yeah, Dave Canales be able to run the ball effectively. He showed us that he can do that as an offensive coordinator last year with the Bucs. Also, pass catching running backs are huge in a Dave Canales offense as well. And the guys they have in the room, all the way down to their third string running back in Miles Sanders, can also catch the football. You're welcome, Bryce.
That was painful. I don't want to talk about Miles Sanders. But I will say, as a Saints fan, as we all are, it is hard to look at the Panthers and be like, oh, they're going to be good, because you don't want them to be good. However, they're definitely going to be better. Last year, they would have had the number 1 pick had they not traded it to Chicago. I don't think they'll be in that position this year. I think there are teams that are obviously worse than the Panthers. I really don't like Bryce Young, and that's coming from a guy who shares a name with him. But I do like Dave Canales. I think he is going to be a step above what they had. I love Jonathan Brooks. I think he's a great player. If Xavier Legette can keep up what he did in his last year at South Carolina, he will be a contributor. Deontay Johnson is all you could ask for a young quarterback, because he is the perfect route running, 7 to 10 yard reception receiver who's going to get 120 targets. So I really like the way they have built this team, and the O-line does play a big part in that as well. If Bryce Young, he doesn't even have to live up to being the number 1 pick. if he can live up to being 75 to 80% of what he was supposed to be, the Panthers can win 5 or 6 games.
Oh no, yeah, for sure. I'm not saying like Bryce Young MVP or anything here, but I mean,
We'll talk about an MVP. Don't you worry.
It was rough sledding last year for Bryce Young, and everyone kind of was just like, all right, wipe the board clean. We're done with him.
And you know what the best part about this Panthers team is too, is that they are built to where you can plug in a different quarterback too. Like you have a steady O-line now, you have weapons in the running back and receiver room, and you have an offensive-minded head coach who has shown to have some success. So if Bryce Young for some reason doesn't work out and it's obvious that he is the glaring issue, you draft a guy next year, or you find somebody in free agency, or you make a superstar trade. Like you now have a situation to where you truly get to address, is your number one pick a number one pick? You couldn't do that last season based off their personnel.
Yeah, and I like the way you put this, that the offense will surprise, because I think the defense still keeps them out of football games.
Oh, for
but
sure. Yeah.
this offense will be very nice.
They did lose their 2 best players.
Yeah, the Panthers as a team, I think, are still going to struggle to find success in the NFL, but I think their offense will be a reason that they could possibly stay in some games.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly where they finished last season offensively. I would assume it was probably in the bottom 5 to 6. I could see them somehow finding their way into the top half this season, kind of like how the Buccaneers did. Buccaneers, I think, with Dave Canales last year, finished 14, 15, 16, somewhere up in there. I could see the Panthers making that same line of having a middle tier to improving offense and then just being brought down by a defense that can't stop the ball. Moving on to my second hot take, because we're all going to give 2. You mentioned you're not going for Bryce Young for MVP. Well, I'm going to talk about a guy who is I think he's hot on the trail to bring home a trophy, and that is Jared Goff. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's stupid. Maybe. But this is hot takes for a reason. Now, I am a known Detroit Lions fan. I do love me some Lions. And there's some outside factors that you have to pay attention to when it comes to Jared Goff. He is one of the best quarterbacks when he is playing indoors. Now, I know that sounds like a horrible argument for an MVP, but of their 17 games, would you like to guess how many are indoors for the Lions this season?
12.
14.
Oh, that's a good number.
They have 3 outside games, and that is quite a low number when it comes to a total of 17 games. I mean, one of them's the Packers when it's going to be late October, early November, so it won't be snowing yet. And then they have the Bears at Soldier Field, which Jared Goff will probably struggle in that game, if we're being honest. But they play a lot of dome games. They play, Minnesota, who plays indoors. Houston plays indoors. Arizona plays indoors. Not to mention their 8 home games, or 9 home games. So, they're racking up these indoor games. Last year at home, Jared Goff's splits were insane. If he played all season like he did at home, he probably would have been in the running for this award last season. He finished with the second most passing yards in the league. He finished top 5 in touchdowns, and he finished top 10 in QBR. Now, he did turn the ball over, and that is a downside of Jared Goff. That does happen. But we've seen guys turn the ball over endlessly in the past and still win the MVP or still be in the race. Josh Allen turns the ball over more than Jared Goff does. And statistically, while Josh Allen does more on the ground, Jared Goff had a better team last season, and Jared Goff was a better passer last season. And you're telling me that he gets to keep what is, I believe, a top 3 receiver in the league in Amon-Ra St. Brown, who just got paid like a top 3 receiver in the league. So he's going to be there, and he fights through all of the pain, as we saw in that Netflix receiver documentary. He has Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield, who's getting another year in that offense, who's a great pass catcher, and I think he'll add a lot to that offense. And when you have a really good quarterback leading a really good team, they're going to get a lot more viewing at the national stage to bring home a trophy like this. We saw it out of Lamar last season. Was that Lamar's peak? I don't think so. I think Lamar could be a much better player than he was last year, but he took home the MVP trophy because he was a top 5 quarterback on a top 5 team. And I think you can see the same thing out of Jared Goff with everything that's around him. Dan Campbell, who is completely bought into him. Brad Holmes is building a team around Jared Goff. You have really good players on the offensive side of the ball, and you made some improvements on defense that might bring home some more wins. My bet is on Jared Goff to finish top 3 for MVP, but if we're making this hot, bring home the trophy.
Yeah, I like it. I think we need to put a stipulation that he can't make any more Lions arguments because he just does it too well. We need to give him a challenge. We need to give him like an actual bad team to go after, to like really hype up.
Okay. I mean, I picked the Commanders, who over-under wins at 6.5, so if they're making the playoffs, I think that's hot.
Yeah, I think Goff MVP season is not crazy because I mean we've seen Aaron Rodgers win it with like some terrible teams, and just because he was a efficient quarterback. And I think Goff has the potential to be a super efficient quarterback, and I think that's where he hangs his hat, is getting the ball out and having high completion percentage, things like that. And I think that's the kind of MVP that this league almost needs, because like everything's about flash and who's making the viral video. But what's good football is Jared Goff and the Lions.
I mean, last year at home, so, his games he gets to play indoors, and of course, he may have had a couple here and there that weren't a home game. He threw for 2,200 yards, had a 71% completion percentage, and 19 touchdowns to 6 picks. If he would have replicated that and thrown for 4,500 yards and 38 touchdowns, and he did throw for 12 picks, so that number doesn't really change, and still throw 70% completion percentage, that's rivaling Lamar for MVP last season.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation around Goff for MVP sounds a lot like the conversations around Drew Brees throughout his career. He's a home game merchant who doesn't do anything super flashy, but just gets it done year over year. Maybe Jared Goff can redeem the years of injustice against Drew.
If Jameson Williams can prove to be a first-round worthy talent, Jared Goff will win MVP. The problem is
That's
outside
very fair.
Of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and Jahmyr Gibbs catching the ball out of the backfield,
Ain't nobody
that's
there.
where they find their issue in the playmaker position on offense. However, they still were scoring 30-plus points a game last year. So, if they even take half a step forward, it's going to be a scary time to be playing the Detroit Lions, who, when we do our division and playoff predictions, we'll obviously be talking about a lot more.
He's going to be unbearable.
Always.
Yeah, and going from our probably strongest or most likely hot take to probably our least likely hot take.
Oh, here we go.
I would like to talk about a certain Pittsburgh Steeler offensive player.
Never fun.
So, Bryce,
That's me.
who's their offensive coordinator?
Arthur Smith.
When was the last time he was an offensive coordinator?
I believe that was the Tennessee Titans.
2020 and 2019, right?
Yep.
What were Derrick Henry's two best years?
Well, if you asked me, I'd say probably in the late 2010s, somewhere in the 18 to 20 range. Yeah, that makes sense.
2019, he had 1,500 yards, and in
Okay.
2020, he had 2,000.
Okay, yeah, that adds up.
It's two best seasons to date
Mm-hmm.
under Arthur Smith.
Okay, yep,
Arthur Smith goes to Atlanta, becomes the head coach.
yep. I'm following so far.
Cordero Patterson, who no one had on their mind, was very good.
I was not expecting a
Four.
Cordero Patterson reference on this
He
pod.
picked him in a mock draft earlier today, by the way. He sends me mock drafts. I send him mock drafts. He picked Cordero Patterson. I didn't look at the rest of the team. I said, why is Cordero Patterson on your team?
Hey, but just hear me out.
All right.
First couple years in Atlanta.
Yep.
Cordero Patterson, fantasy relevant, by the way.
I think he finished as like an RB2, Arthur Smith's first year in Atlanta.
It was nice.
It
I had
was
him on one of my
insane.
teams.
Yeah,
It was nice.
crazy.
Yeah. All right.
It was crazy.
So it's making sense so far, right?
Yeah, I'm following. Arthur Smith is really good with running backs.
Yes. And what was the knock on last year's? That one on, I guess, going from Arthur Smith in Atlanta to what they have now?
I mean,
Less running the ball, more
They used to
spread.
play football like they were playing in 1960.
yeah,
Yeah.
it used to be
Um,
very 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Yeah. And what kind of running back does that benefit?
That benefits in between the tackles, power back, get you extra yards.
A
kind of
big
guy.
boy.
Yeah, a beefy boy.
So
some would say.
which out of the two main running backs for Pittsburgh, Jalen
You almost had it.
Jalen Warren
Mm-hmm.
and Najee Harris?
Well,
Which out of those two most similar to Derrick Henry?
I'm gonna pick option C,
Out of-
Cordero Patterson.
Hey, no.
He's done it with him before.
Yeah, he's done it with him before. But no, I see your point about Najee Harris. He fits the Arthur Smith system to a T.
And I feel like out of those two, I feel like Najee Harris can be more of a.
I agree. Yes.
Yes.
Why you had to do me like that?
I'm waiting.
More of a workhorse back. Just because of what we've seen in the past out of the Pittsburgh Steelers before Jalen Warren was effective. So Najee Harris in 2021, his best season as a rookie, 1,200 yards
Respectable.
on 307 attempts, which
Am I supposed to do that math in my head? Was that like 4.2 a carry?
3.9, but close enough.
So he sucked. Okay, cool.
But that's the kind of back that Arthur Smith uses. One that runs the ball and runs the ball and runs the ball and doesn't matter.
3.9 yards in a cloud of dust.
He had 307 carries on a season.
Yeah, I mean he was high volume. To say the
Everybody
least.
talks about Derrick Henry being overused. Very rarely has he gone over 307 attempts on a season. Of course he did. Whenever he broke 2K, he had 378. But other than that, he only ever broke 307 once.
Okay.
Also, Arthur Smith, big blocking tight end kind of.
Dude, Darnell Washington
Darnell Washington
is going to get so many snaps this
So
season.
many snaps, which will also pay off for the workhorse back in Pittsburgh being Najee Harris, and that's my hot take, and that's all I've got.
So your hot take is that Najee Harris is going to be good?
Najee Harris is going to have the best season of his career,
Whoa.
Okay.
which isn't
That's-
crazy.
You know,
1,200
it's-
yards is not a
I was
not
going
a
to say,
crazy
it's
amount,
not hard to beat being mediocre, so I like your point.
but there's a chance.
My only issue with that is you're comparing Najee Harris to Derrick Henry a lot, and I feel like you can't compare 6 foot slow, unathletic Najee Harris to built like a defensive end yet still outruns you, Derrick Henry.
I see the blueprint here. I see what you're laying down. But when Arthur Smith was with Atlanta, there was no guy.
See,
Tyler Algier still found his way onto the field to where Cordell Patterson, Tyler Algier shared the backfield. There was no
Tyler Algier
guy.
did rush for over 1,000 yards his rookie year.
Even
People
with
forget that.
Bijan Robinson in the fold last year, who I think we agree is the most talented player we've mentioned outside of Derrick Henry in this conversation, Tyler Algier still saw the field.
Hey,
Hey,
We're waiting for
we're
it.
here.
Bijan Robinson has come out himself and said that the coaching staff wanted to limit his numbers to not Derrick Henry him.
So
Will
Arthur
the
Smith
coaching
have that
staff
same-
filled with Arthur Smith?
will Arthur Smith have that same attitude when it comes to Najee Harris and Jalen Warren? Because here's another thing you have to look at, and I'm not trying to say you're
Hey,
And
I started
it's
this
a hot take for a
conversation
reason, yeah.
with this might be the worst one.
But when you look at Derrick Henry and who he had behind him, it was typically Hassan Haskin
Oh, that's
and
a crazy name. to
Darrington Evans, as opposed to
pull. Someone with actual
Jalen
juice.
Warren,
Yeah.
who was a pretty solid option last year. So I think for me, it's hard to compare apples to oranges, which I think you're doing with the Titans versus the Steelers talk. However, I do agree with the fact that Arthur Smith is going to put Najee Harris in the best situation he's been in his NFL
For
career.
sure.
That's more of the connection that I was trying to make, was that Najee Harris fits the Arthur Smith offense better than Jalen Warren being this speedier
So
back.
would you argue that your hot take is more along the lines of Najee Harris locks up the number one running back position more than
Yes,
it being
absolutely.
a 50-50
I'm not
split?
I'm not saying Najee Harris is going to run for 2K this year.
Right.
I'm
right.
saying he's going to be the de facto running back for the
Which I think
Steelers.
is a take, because last year it felt like a 50-50 split. And not that I watched a bunch of Steelers games, but I play a lot of fantasy football, so I'm invested in these guys. So for us to see Najee Harris solidify himself as the number one running back in Pittsburgh, coming off a Jalen Warren career year, would be something that we would not expect to see.
Yeah, we'll see what happens this season. But so if I'll go ahead and jump in with the last hot take here, and if my Panthers take was a little bit above lukewarm,
I know him.
then
Yeah.
this next take came straight out of a volcano. I can't even say my words.
Bro,
so
you
caught
are-
up in.
You are reboing right now.
I know, I'm so caught up in Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears. So I've been on the record trashing rookie quarterbacks on this podcast, saying that it's rare for a rookie quarterback to really ball out rookie year. I think Caleb Williams fits the mold of somebody who can take care of that in year one. I think Caleb Williams is in a position to break both the passing yards and touchdown record for rookie quarterbacks in his first season. Those records are 43-74 for passing yards and then 31 touchdowns. 31 touchdowns held by Justin Herbert and the pass yards by Andrew Luck. So I really think Caleb Williams is in an incredible situation with the Chicago Bears. It's kind of the inverse of what the Panthers did with Bryce Young, where last year they tried to really add on to the offense by adding Adam Thielen, and that's about it. And then now seeing, okay, we really got to boost up our young quarterback. Now let's give him some firepower. The Chicago Bears had a little bit more foresight behind them. They saw, they saw that they had an opportunity at a prospect that many people considered like generational and game-breaking. And they said, let's go ahead and put him in the best possible situation from the start. They already have DJ Moore, who had a breakout campaign last season and has proven to be a number one wide receiver, courtesy of last year. They bring in Keenan Allen, who's been one of the most consistent wide receivers since he's entered the league. You add that to this offense, giving Caleb Williams a easy completion merchant right there. And then you spend the number 9 pick in the draft on a wide receiver that probably would have been wide receiver 1 in any other draft class in Rome Odunze. So they are loaded at wide receiver. You add more talent to the running back room with DeAndre Swift. You have a decent enough offensive line where it's not going to really hinder Caleb Williams' ability to make plays. And then you add Shane Waldron calling plays for this offense, where in 3 seasons with Seattle, you really saw him unlock Geno Smith, who with the 3 seasons in Seattle finished 5th in completion percentage, 8th in yards per reception, and 10th in passing touchdowns. So with those 3 years, it ended up being 83 touchdowns. So the blueprint is there. And I think we can all agree that Caleb Williams on paper is a more talented player than Geno Smith. In 2022, Geno threw 30 touchdowns and 4,200 yards, just under 4,300. So if Shane Waldron can come in and unlock whatever he did with Geno Smith, but apply it to the generational prospect of Caleb Williams, I think we'll see some real firepower from the Bears offense.
I am a known Chicago Bears hater, without a doubt. Every season, I have a bet with another familiar face to this podcast with
forgot about this bet.
Clown Car, where we've done it. I think this would be our 3rd season in a row, although I don't know if we're going to do it this year, where the push is 7 wins. If they go under, he has to do something. If they go over, I have to do something. And every year, I'm like, dude, the under is easy. The Bears stink. And that has proven me right the past 2 seasons. However, this year, they get the number 1 and the number 9 pick, use it on a guy who you explain is generational and a wide receiver who I think is pretty damn good. And then they bring in, Keenan Allen to be similar to what we talked about with Deontay Johnson, the ultimate safety blanket for a young quarterback. Have a good enough offensive line, as like you said. And then also, their defense is really underrated. They have a very good defense. They truly do. With, Montez Sweat came over and proved to be one of the best pass rushers in the league and really took that defense up a level last year. Tremaine Edmonds is one of the best athletic linebackers you'll see. And then Jalen Johnson got paid in the offseason like he deserved as one of the best corners. So they have the blueprint to be a very, very good squad. But your hot take wasn't the Bears are going to be good. Your hot take was Caleb Williams is going to break the rookie record for passing yards and touchdowns. And for me, I just don't see that because of, I don't know how to put this, because of the way he has to play the game with Shane Waldron. Yes, Geno Smith did have 30 touchdowns and 4,200 yards, but I think that was such an outlier of a season to me because we saw what Geno Smith did last year, and Shane Waldron was still there, and It was quite embarrassing for that Seahawks offense. While Caleb Williams is a lot more talented than Geno, I don't think Caleb Williams is going to step in day one and be the greatest rookie quarterback of all time just because of what we saw in his college journey. He went from sitting the bench at Oklahoma to being the guy at Oklahoma to following Lincoln Riley and winning a Heisman at USC to last season going 7-5 and having a lot of subpar performances, in my opinion. I think if you base it only off of last season, what they did there last year in college, Jaden Daniels had a better year than Caleb Williams did.
Well, I mean, yeah,
Bo Nix had a better year than Caleb Williams did. Even, you could argue Michael Penix had a better year than Caleb Williams did. So I don't know if that was a USC problem or a Caleb Williams problem. I'm not going to say it was either one. I just think it's a lot to ask of the number one pick to come in and immediately break 2 records. Now I could see him throwing for 3,900 yards and 28 touchdowns and really cementing himself as one of the best young quarterbacks. But coming in and breaking both of those records is very hot. It's not impossible, but I just don't see it this year out of Caleb Williams.
I mean, Shane Waldron's success in the NFL is not just isolated to Geno. I mean, he was with the Rams and Jared Goff, your MVP, Jared Goff,
He is my
from
MVP.
2018 to 2020, and they produced very similar results.
And, Goff's best years are now with Ben Johnson, so we'll see.
Well, I mean, you give Caleb Williams Ben Johnson.
Oh,
I mean,
now
we're
I'm
talking.
in. Now I'm in.
But then additionally, with the Shane Waldron offense, they limit turnovers. Interceptions are down when it comes to a Shane Waldron offense. And then if you look at Caleb Williams, I think there's a lot of name fatigue that goes around a prospect that I think is really, really good. I mean, you go back to his junior season at USC, or before his last season, and his Heisman campaign. Everyone was like, yeah, this guy's going to be incredible. Takes a slight drop off in production his senior year, but so did the entire offense. I mean, I can't even name his number one option.
Oh, yeah, I don't remember either.
You
Like
took
I
away
would
Jordan
know the
Addison.
name, but I don't remember the name.
The USC offense struggled as a whole because it was Caleb Williams and everybody else. So I'm on the side that Caleb Williams of 2 years ago is going to show up for the Chicago Bears in the Shane Waldron offense.
And that very well could be the case. I mean, I'm not saying Caleb Williams is going to be a bust of a first round pick or a first overall pick. That's not at all what I'm saying. I just think, and to be fair, he is coming into the best situation that a number one pick has ever gone into, I think. I mean, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, a decent offensive line where you have a lot of young guys who get to learn and mesh with Caleb Williams. I just think that it's not the recipe right now for him to come out and throw 4,400 yards and 35 touchdowns, because I think the Bears are going to try to win football games, and for them to win football games, he doesn't have to throw 350 yards and 3 touchdowns every game, including DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, Khalil Herbert in the backfield, who are 3 running backs who have shown capable at the NFL level. Shane Waldron also loves to run the ball. I mean, we saw it. He was abusing Kenneth Walker, and I don't know if he was there with Chris Carson, but Chris Carson was an insane running back for Seattle. I don't remember if he was there or not, but like
he was there. His first season was the Rashad Penny experience.
Okay, yeah. But, Seattle was never a team who was chucking the ball up 45 times a game, and I feel like Caleb Williams would have to be in a situation where he's in a shootout every game to kind of get to those numbers like we saw with Justin Herbert when he was playing with the Chargers. Like, they were playing from behind and throwing the ball every down, basically, and that's why he scored that. Andrew Luck came into a number one team that just lost Peyton Manning and didn't have as many options as they once did, and he was throwing the ball a lot. So I don't think he'll have the volume necessarily. It's not the talent. It's not the people around him. It's not the coaching staff. It's just the situation right now is not built for him to put up video game numbers.
Yeah, my one knock on Caleb Williams is how sensational he was his freshman year at Oklahoma. There was this hunger and this eagerness to be on the field, and now it's kind of just I'm here because I'm the number one quarterback, and there's not a fire that's underneath him. He's not trying to prove the doubters wrong because there kind of aren't any doubters. He's the number one pick, but there's just this arrogance around him, and I've never liked a guy like that, even if they were on my team at the time. And I just can't get behind a guy like that, and I don't know if that's a knock to if he can break the records or not, but I cannot say that I agree.
Yeah, I mean these are hot takes for a reason. I mean,
Absolutely.
If Bryce is perfect on running back selections, I'm the complete opposite when it comes to quarterbacks. So if you
brother.
if you listen to this episode, bet the under on every Caleb Williams stat that you can find. Because he's probably going to have the worst season of a rookie quarterback ever.
No, I don't think that. I think a more accurate prediction would be 3,700 to 3,800 yards, 27 to 28 touchdowns. Still a very respectable rookie quarterback season. I mean, he could mimic what C.J. Stroud did last season for all we know, but that's neither one of those are the record for what we saw. And yet we hold C.J. Stroud to a standard of being a top 7-8 quarterback in the league. So Caleb Williams can still have a fantastic season and not break a record. I think that's more what my thought is he can still be a really good NFL quarterback without breaking these numbers.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hot take part of it. I think Caleb Williams is going to be an awesome NFL quarterback. For him to break both records, he would have to have the greatest season of all time.
Yep.
And I mean, that's the
Easy.
hot take part.
Yeah. I mean, and another issue I have is he escaped to the Pac-12, and we know the defense is optional, and that's where all of his major stats have come from. But I loved him as a freshman in Oklahoma. There's a chance that he is this generational talent that he's been sold as, and so, yeah, I mean, it's a valid take. It's a possibility for sure, but is he Andrew Luck or Justin Herbert? I don't know if the situation deems it.
Yeah, and the best part about the NFL is every season there are surprises. It feels like every single year somebody goes worse the first in their division. I saw a stat the other day, or I researched a stat the other day, that every year since 2010, at least one team makes it from the conference championship back the next season. But the thing is usually it's only one team. It's not usually two. I mean, 4 out of the last 6 they've had 2, but there's only been one instance since 2000 where 3 teams repeated and made it back into the conference championship weekend. So every year we see parity when it comes down to the stretch of getting to that Super Bowl. Could it be the Commanders? We don't know. Could Jared Goff win an MVP? He will. Will the Jets win their division and stay healthy? Probably not. Is Najee Harris good? We have yet to see. Panthers, will they make a push in the NFC South with that offense finding some fireworks? It's possible. It's probably the worst division in football, so they've got a chance. And then can Caleb Williams be the greatest rookie quarterback of all time? He's being touted like it, and we'll see it on the field come September. So that is our NFL hot takes for this upcoming season. We might give an updated one before the season starts. We'll talk division winners. We'll talk Super Bowl predictions. We're going to get back into fantasy football as well. If you love fantasy football, make sure to check out our last few episodes. We did our top 10 series with all the positions, as well as doing a mock draft last week, and our deep sleepers and my guys. So we've done a lot of fantasy football recently. We got back into some real football today, talking X's and O's, and we'll continue to come to you every single week talking about our favorite teams, our favorite things, and our hot takes off the dome. I'm Redfish.
I'm Lionel Frankenstein.
And I'm Rebo Hustle.
And we will see you next time.